Welcome to your reset with Christiane Piano, where the purpose is to support you in releasing all that you are not, so the truth of who you really are can emerge. This is accomplished through working with the body-mind from an ontological perspective. We use various modalities to support you in supporting yourself exactly where you are, so that you may return to an experience of wholeness and ease, moment by moment. Deep reflection is one of the greatest tools through which to do this. To take a moment, to pause, assess, reflect, and literally and figuratively reset, come back to center, and move back into your one and precious life with increased clarity and purpose. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to part 1 of episode 101. I'm Christiane Piano. Ooh, what a moment of celebration that was for all of us. I want to start today by offering a huge, heartfelt thank you to everyone who contributed their voices, who shared the episode, and who expressed their excitement for that 100th milestone. To hear the resonance of these reflections in your worlds from your friends, your colleagues, and your families has been a profound gift. Thank you. As I sit with the weight and the beauty of that milestone and begin the work of moving into this, our 101st episode, I am reminded of how quickly the landscape can change. And now I find myself in a moment of transition. I'm on the other side of that high. The excitement has settled, and I am back here in the quiet rhythm of the weekly creation of these reflections. It's a specific kind of space to occupy. Even though it's been a couple of months since my move in November, the internal adjustment, that recalibration to a new environment is still very much a lived reality. So each week I sit here in the quiet. I don't come to the chair with a preset agenda of what I need to say in these reflections. Instead, I just sit with what is. I lean into life and listen, waiting for that moment of internal clarity where the next reflection begins to reveal itself. So here we are. At the same time, I am also deeply aware that I don't exist in a vacuum. As I navigate these personal shifts, I am simultaneously looking at what is unfolding in our world at large. And to be honest, for me personally, it's quite off-putting. It's scary. There is so much up in the air. So many people are being terrorized. And there's a very real, very heavy layer of fear pressing in on all of us. For me, finding the balance between the gratitude for our shared celebration and the weight of what is happening in the world, it isn't a destination I've reached. It's an active, moment-to-moment negotiation. I share this with you because I want to be honest. I am right here in the middle of the grapple with you. I don't have a formula that makes me immune to the fear or the uncertainty. In fact, if there were a formula, I wouldn't need to stay so awake to what is unfolding. But I am choosing to stay in this way of meeting myself. It isn't that I have to do this work, it's that I want to. I want to stay in this awareness because if I don't, if I let the fear take the wheel and I lose that thread, then I am simply not available. I'm not available for my family and the people I love, or for my friends and the clients I work with. Choosing to stay present in the middle of the unknown isn't about following a path. It's how I stay anchored in myself. It's how I choose to remain sturdy and available, even when the world feels like it's spinning. And it's from this place of being available, of staying present to what is, that I've been able to really listen to you. I've been sitting with the feedback you sent in, the points that resonated, and the moments that struck a chord in episode 100. I can't speak to all of them today, but I've decided to take a few of those threads and weave them together for us. Now, if this is the very first time you're tuning in, I want to welcome you. You are joining a global community, and while we've been in this conversation for over 2 years now, I want you to know that you haven't missed the path. You are arriving exactly when you are meant to. In this space, we aren't looking for one right path or one single methodology that will fix everything, because we have many chapters in our lives, don't we? And what works for you in one chapter may not work in the next. So rather than reaching for a formula, what we are doing here is cultivating the capacity to remain. We are developing a quality of presence that allows us to stay steady and awake within our own lives, regardless of which chapter is currently unfolding. And I would like to be clear about what that looks like in the grit and reality of daily life. I'm not here to give you a manual for a machine, because you are not a machine. A manual assumes there is a right way to operate, but your life is a living, breathing, ever-changing process. So rather than a manual, I invite you to consider your own life as a space of discovery. It's about finding a way to be the witness of your own experience, to look at the messiness of being human with a quiet, open-ended curiosity. It's that part of you that can stand in the middle of the storm or the quiet and simply say, so this is what is happening right now. When I talk about this space, the laboratory of the self, I mean your body-mind. And to be clear about what I mean by that, I'm talking about the whole of you, not just your physical body, not just your mind, and certainly not just the roles you play or the images you keep of who you think you are. I am talking about all of you, all of the layers, seen and unseen, discovered and undiscovered. It is this whole where all the variables of your life are interacting right now. And it is here that we have the opportunity, if we so choose, to develop a specific capacity, the ability to be both the observed and the observer. Because in reality, we are both. But when we forget that, we get lost in the drama of it all. We become the bracing, we become the fear, we become the exhaustion. Developing the capacity to be the observer allows us to see who's experiencing and what is being experienced. I invite you to take a moment right now as you are listening. Can you identify that for yourself in this very moment? What is the what that is being experienced in your laboratory? And can you find the who, that part of you that is simply aware of it? I ask because this isn't just theory for me. I am in this practice of remembering with you. After a big milestone like the one we just shared, I often feel a drastic drop in energy. Like that experience of the tide going out. Without awareness, I might judge that low. I might try to fix it or fight it. But as the witness, I can just look at my own fatigue and meet it without the layer of judgment. And if judgment is showing up in you today, I invite you to just notice it let it be there and show up for yourself anyway. In this space, we start to feel the difference between a fleeting want and what we actually need to return to balance. You might feel the draw to the couch instead of just reacting. You listen. You might say to yourself, yes, I feel the pull to collapse. But I can feel that isn't actually what will nourish me right now. Or perhaps you realize the couch is exactly what is needed, and you finally give yourself permission for that inaction. I invite you to consider that the pause, this quiet listening, is actually invested time. It is the unseen labor of your body-mind recalibrating. And this awareness, this ability for you to support yourself without trying to force a change, is why I keep coming back to the words of the Spanish poet Antonio Machado. Traveler, there is no path. The path is made by walking. If there is no pre-made path, then how we walk, whether we are lost in the noise of the obstacles or quietly reflecting on the next step, becomes everything. In my own life, walking is one of the primary ways I release my knots, the literal ones in my body and the tangled ones in my mind. Being in nature supports me in a total reset. It's an invitation to come back to center, to that Goldilocks place where things aren't too hot or too cold, but just right. Now, why do I speak to this? The returning to just right. I have stated this in past episodes, but it is a while since I have spoken to it, and it seems like a perfect moment for a reminder, just in case you may need it. The importance of taking a step from a balanced place, especially when it comes to our dreams. But before we get to that, let's take a moment for you to apply this question to yourself and your own circumstances in your life right now. Where in your day, in your body, could you invite a recentering? Why would that prove supportive? What happens when we move from non-clarity, from extremes? Think about it for a moment, but not from a philosophical perspective, from your lived experience. And after you have done that, perhaps consider if you have a tendency, a pattern, when it comes to this. And you may want to take a mental note or write it down. We will not be speaking to that here in this episode, but it is important to be aware of it for yourself if you choose to take this work on at another level, so that you can use your awareness as fertilizer for your growth. But there are plenty of episodes on that, and that is not the point of this episode. So, back to the point. I am taking the time to invite you to reflect on this because until we create that pause, until we take the time to clear out the muck, the heaviness, or perhaps for you, the frantic overdrive, there is simply no room for anything else. If we want something new to unfold in our lives, if we want to create space for our dreams, our visions to unfold into reality, we have to empty the vessel first. And once that vessel has some space, you can choose to use that emptiness to open up your listening. Listening to what exactly? In this reflection, I am talking about listening to life, listening to that inner calling, that constant knock at the door, that idea that keeps nudging at you when the noise stops. I call this giving ourselves permission to dream. Please take note that I am not talking about daydreaming, the kind we do to escape our lives. I'm talking about something much more visceral. A dream that feels like a directive. A dream that doesn't ask you to figure out how, but simply asks you to acknowledge that it exists. But once you create that space, once you acknowledge that visceral directive, be aware that the world tends to rush back in. The part of us that craves certainty and control starts applying its own yardstick, trying to measure something that isn't yet meant to be measured. I've been sitting with this since episode 100. Marking that milestone was about more than just a number. It was a testament to the visceral impact of this work in people's lives. It was about the reality of what happens when we stay in the room and honor the process, even when the quote-unquote rules of the world try to tell a different story. But there is a part of us, that ego voice, that doesn't know how to weigh the depth of that impact. It doesn't know what to do with a visceral directive that hasn't fully bloomed yet. And this is where we have a catch-22 situation. That part of us only knows how to measure the world it sees, the world of logic, control, and outcomes. And because it's scared or impatient, it starts applying the only yardstick it has. It starts telling you that growth is only measured by numbers, by financial benchmarks, social media followers, or the external proof of making it. Now, I'm not saying that numbers are not to be considered. They are a form of measurement, but they are not the only form of measurement. They are a piece of the pie. As the witness of your own process, you have to remember one single data point does not tell the whole story. If you only measure success by the fruit you can see today, the money, the followers, the applause, you completely ignore the foundation you are building. You ignore the way you are anchoring yourself and getting sturdy. And when it comes to realizing dreams, if you only value what is visible, you will think the silence of the results means nothing is happening. You'll think you failed, when really, you're just in the stage where the roots are taking hold. At the outset of bringing a dream into reality, it is so new and so tender. We need to hold the space for this dream from a different kind of place, because if we do not, if we let that one single data point of results define the entire experiment, we lose the just right center we work so hard to find. We lose our footing. We start looking for the exit or convinced we need to change course entirely. We tell ourselves it's not aligned. We start scanning for plan B. We tell ourselves it's just not aligned. But is it truly unaligned? Or are we just lacking what I call staying power? We are now getting to a vital realization in this conversation. The heart of what staying power actually asks of us. But before diving in, I would like to take a moment to share some of my own background so you understand that staying power is not just theory, but everyday lived reality. For those of you who do not know me well or who have never worked with me before, I want to be very clear. One of my living tenets is that I would never invite you to put something into practice that I myself in my own life am not practicing. It's easy to speak to theory. It's easy to hand out advice from a distance. But I personally believe in the power of lived experience over the comfort of philosophy. And so in the spirit of that integrity, I want to share a piece of my story that I haven't spoken to before. I've hinted at shifts and changes, but I haven't spoken to the actual landscape of it. Simply put, I'm 54 years old and I'm starting over. I have spent the majority of the last 21 years of my life invested in being a mother and a homemaker. I chose these roles, and they have grown me more than I can imagine, and I'm grateful. That was not the only thing I channeled my energy into, but it was the main focus. And yet, as I navigated divorce, I came to a stark realization. The powers that be, the systems of logic and finance, place no quantitative value on those roles. In the eyes of the world's yardstick, I am starting over from square one with no recognized experience to fall back on. I've had to do a lot of inner work to recognize that just because the world doesn't count those years, it doesn't mean they don't have immense value. But that doesn't change the visceral reality of standing in my kitchen thinking, what on earth am I going to do now? I share this because when I talk about staying power, I'm not talking about the courage to move forward when you don't have the traditional safety nets or the years of planning that we are told we must have by this age. It's about building a future when you are starting from a place that the world considers behind. I am choosing to stay in the room with my vision, even when the traditional rules of security and retirement planning tell a different story. I am betting on the value of my own experience, even if it hasn't been quantified yet. And I'll be honest, there is a specific kind of weight that comes with being a beginner at this age. Building something that doesn't have a roadmap and doing it without the arrival or the proof that the world expects you to have by now can be heavy. There is a loud cultural narrative that says at 54 I should be settled, and that can trigger me. It challenges that just right center I've worked so hard to create. Because the truth is, I've reached a point where I realized I had outgrown the life I was living. I was standing at a crossroads where I had to choose. I could stay for the sake of security, but I knew that if I did, a vital part of me would have to die to make that work. So I chose the harder path. I chose to listen to that visceral directive, even though it meant walking away from the safety of the known. It was a painful choice, and some mornings I still wake up and don't quite recognize the life I'm in. But I am learning that staying power isn't just about sticking with a project. It's about having the courage to stay with yourself when the transition gets loud. I honestly hesitated to speak this out loud today. But I realize that if I don't, I'm not being fair to the reality of this walk. Because when you choose to listen to that inner calling and step on to an unmapped path, it unearths everything. You feel it in your body, you hear it in the circular loop of your thoughts, and you see it reflected back to you in the world's expectations. Your inner critic gets very loud when the road ahead is unmapped. And that is the exact moment where the yardstick of the world tries to take over. That is the moment where it feels safer to bolt than to breathe. It's in that specific uncomfortable gap where we have to decide what we are really actually measuring by. This is what I am learning. Staying power isn't just about sticking with a project. It's about having the courage to stay with yourself when that transition gets loud. This is what I mean when I talk about staying power. I'm not talking about grit or white-knuckling your way through a life you hate. I'm talking about the capacity to remain present with a visceral directive, even when the results are silent. It is the ability to hold the space for your own growth, even when your nervous system is convinced you are behind or that it's time to quit. Now, I want to be very clear about a subtle but vital distinction here. Staying power is not about making things work at any cost. It's not about forcing a situation to stay alive when it has reached its natural completion. In my own life, I left a marriage of 20 years. One could look at that and ask, where was the staying power there? But that is the paradox. Sometimes, to live into your vision, to truly listen to life, you have to allow things to come to completion. You have to have the courage to close one door so you can stand perhaps for the first time in the hallway of the new thing. Staying power is what happens after you've made that choice. It's the capacity to stay in that hallway when you're 54 and starting over. It's the grit to build this work from the ground up without a roadmap and without the proof the world expects of you. It's the refusal to bolt back to a settled path that you already know doesn't work for you, even when the inner critic is screaming for a plan B. For me, this has been an unearthing of who I thought I was. It is the slow, hard labor of remaining in the room long enough for the new version of myself to catch up. I invite you now to apply this to your own life. Where are you currently being tested in your ability to stay? Where are the results failing to show you what you think they should be? What project or calling are you continuing to put off for the umpteenth time because the gap feels too wide? I'm asking these questions to get you reflecting. If one of those hit a nerve, stay there for a second. Let it be specific. The reason I am inviting you into that space, the reason I'm asking you to look at where you are tempted to bolt, is because I am standing in that gap with you. And I know how heavy the silence of the results can feel. I want to look closer at that gap for a moment because staying there is where the real challenge lies. The reason it is so difficult to remain present is because of an observed tendency we have, especially when we are under pressure. We've touched on this before in episode 99, and if you haven't listened to that one yet, I encourage you to, as it will support what I am speaking to now. But the specific piece I want to highlight today is this observed pattern of treating information like a product. In a culture of speed, there is a tendency to consume a concept intellectually and immediately move on to the next thing, often before that first insight has had the time to move from the head into the cells of the body. We see this tendency to want the results of embodied learning without the actual duration required for the body-mind to integrate that change. And when the results don't show up at the speed of our consumption, the observed response is to conclude that the work isn't working. As the witness, we have to recognize that the temptation to scan for a plan B is often just a biological reaction to this cultural narrative of fast. It's a narrative that simply doesn't match the actual pace of human integration. Staying power, then, is the choice to remain present with the integration, regardless of that external clock. It's the shift from what am I getting to what am I serving? Because when the context is service, the quality of your presence becomes more vital than the speed of the outcome. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Don't be pushed by your problems, be led by your dreams." When we are pushed by our problems, by the not enough, the silence of results, or the cultural pressure for speed, we are in a state of reaction. We are scanning for the exit. But to be led by a dream requires a radical kind of trust. It requires you to let go of the control and allow your life to turn upside down, as Rumi suggested, trusting that the side to come is exactly what is needed for your maturation. This is the deeper heart of staying power. It's the capacity to endure the long winter without needing to force a new spring. It's the willingness to age into your vision. I would like to give you the space to actually sit with that, to feel the difference between being pushed by the world's yardstick and being led by that visceral directive. If I were to rush into the how right now, I would be feeding into that very cultural speed we just observed. I would be giving you more information to consume rather than the duration you need to actually be with your own unearthing. So we are going to make this a two-part conversation. Take this week to simply stay in the room. In part 2, we're going to look at the stewardship required to navigate that long winter, the mechanics of the nervous system and how we move from the panic of if to the orientation of how. But for today, just take a breath. Acknowledge the dream, and just show up for this 101st step. Thank you for tuning in. I look forward to hearing what resonated with you, and please feel free to share this episode, like or follow, to support more people in finding out about its existence. Be well. If you are interested in working with me on any level of body-mind well-being, whether it be through individual body-mind maturation work sessions, perhaps participating in a series, individual privates, or through my video on-demand services. If you have questions, if you would like to engage on any level, feel free to schedule a free 15-minute consult in the appointment section, www.christianepiano.com, or email me directly at growth@christianepiano.com.